Hello, guys. With the holiday freeze coming soon in the NHL, I want to take a chance to talk about five teams that I think are overachieving to start this NHL season, and five teams that I think are underachieving from their previous expectations and my personal expectations going into the year. So I'm going to go through, as I mentioned, five on both sides, and then I'll break down why I think a team's been either over exceeding their expectations or under exceeding those expectations. So be sure to like this video. Please subscribe to our channel as well. We'd love to have you along for the ride. And we'll just get into it right away with the first team that I think has been so far overachieving their expectations by a decent amount. The first team that I want to discuss that I feel has really overexceeded their expectations this year is the Washington Capitals. The Capitals were a team where there's a big cloud over them last year. They got swept in the first round, had a horrible goal differential. I think it was like minus 15, minus 20. It was remarkable that they even made the playoffs. Got swept. Ovechkin had a down year with his goal scoring, so people thought, oh, is he going to fall off now? And that has not been the case this year. Spencer Carberry is on a Jack Adams type of season just with his coaching and how well the Capitals have been playing so far this year. They're on pace for well over 100 points. Chikrin, Dubois, and Matt Waugh have all been really good additions to this team. None of them have been superstar, completely going crazy type of players, but they've all played their role really well and have had decent bounce back season so far. The Dylan Strome Ovechkin connection's also been dynamic this year, and Ovechkin soon to return from injury. That connection is going to be rekindled once again. There was concern, okay, Backstrom's going to retire now. Who's going to step in? And Dylan Strome stepped in flawlessly. So once Ovechkin's healthy, this team's just going to keep rolling. They haven't fallen off while he's been on IR. And once he returns, I think the Capitals are for sure going to be a lock to make the playoffs this year, which was much better than what I expected. I expected they would be a decent amount out of the playoffs this year. Moving over to the underachievers, one of the first teams that needs to be discussed in this category is the New York Rangers. The Rangers were a team that I thought would be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, one of the top teams in the NHL. I had them as an Eastern Conference finalist once again. I expected good things for the Rangers, and any logical person, unless you are a Rangers hater, predicted the Rangers to do really well this year. And things have just completely fallen apart on the Rangers. They started the season 5-0-1. As of recording this video, they've gone 10-12 since, and they've traded Trouba, but Lindgren, Miller, and Fox have all regressed to a severe level, especially Miller and Lindgren. There's questions about if Miller's even going to get a contract extension with the Rangers this upcoming season. If so, you'd have to manage the bridge. And Rangers fans are right now calling for Ryan Lindgren to be traded now. This also goes alongside Mika Zibanejad, who's had a really bad year to start the season. He's gone off to a terrible start. Chris Kreider hasn't looked great either. And the overarching thing is the defense has been terrible. The 5-on-5 play has been terrible. And for the Rangers, the past couple of years, they've been able to get by that glaring hole with their great power play and with their outstanding goaltending. But Igor Shesterkin, Jonathan Quick, and their power play just haven't been able to lead the Rangers to many wins this year. The power play has fallen off, and there's only so much Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick can do. So overall, the Rangers have tremendously underexceeded expectations. They're still likely going to make the playoffs as a wild card one, wild card two team, but for a team that was, in my mind, a lock as one of the top teams in the Metro this year, this is a huge disappointment. And one must wonder as well, if the struggles continue, do the Rangers look to sell off some pieces at the trade deadline? I think that might be entirely possible, but we'll see what happens going forward with the Rangers. Another team that's really overexceeded expectations from what I expected going into the year was the Philadelphia Flyers. I wrote off the Flyers last year as well. I had them as a bottom five team. I thought they were going to be right up with the Chicago Blackhawks and San Jose Sharks in the Macklin Celebrini race. That didn't happen. They just barely missed the playoffs because they had a rough end of season and just missed out on the playoffs due to things just falling apart for them. And this year, the Flyers are right back to prove me wrong once again. I had them once again as a bottom five team, and the Flyers are firmly in the playoff hunt. And I think this is just a testimony to John Tortorella. He gets the best out of his players. Now, the Flyers are still by no means a playoff team in my mind, but they've been sticking around. And arguably the biggest thing for the Flyers last year in comparison to this year is the fact that this year they have Matvei Michkov, who has come over to the NHL 2 years earlier than people expected, and he has just been taking the NHL by storm. He's been essentially a point-per-game player so far this season and is by far one of the frontrunners for the Calder and likely will win the Calder if he keeps things going. His injection of offense has been massive for Philadelphia this year, and that's been a big reason why the Flyers have been really solid this year.
I still expect them to be sellers. Their goaltending still is quite shaky, so I do have some concerns there. But overall, we have to call it what it is. The Flyers are no longer a bottom five team. I think honestly they are fringe playoff team. I think they could potentially make the wild card if things break their way, but I have them in that tier of just missing out on the playoffs, and that's still much better than I expected them to be this year. Another team that hasn't been living up to expectations, and we can be honest, they probably haven't been living up to expectations the past couple of years, and that's the Buffalo Sabres, a team that many people felt should be a playoff team this year, at least be very competitive and get close to that playoff line. That hasn't been the case. It seems like they've regressed more from 2 seasons ago, where they just missed out on the playoffs by 1 point. And there's a lot of problems with the Sabres as a whole. You have Cousins and Jack Quinn, who are having down years right now for the Sabres. Cousins, a couple years removed from having pretty close to 70 points. Last year and a half, just it hasn't been clicking for him. He potentially might get moved. And then you have Jack Quinn, another young player, young forward, who just hasn't really stepped into a solid top six role yet. He hasn't been able to take advantage of it and play really well. The defense has been all right. The big thing is the goaltending for the Buffalo Sabres. It's just not clicking right now. They don't have a solid goalie, and that's been kind of holding them back. Overall, I think the Sabres are a team that can still turn things around, but if they don't get things turned around quickly, Kevin Adams will likely be fired by the end of the year. The Minnesota Wild are a team that I really didn't expect much this year. I thought last year was a sign of what's come this year, and I expected things to get even worse. They weren't able to make any offseason moves from last season to this season because of the Parisian Suter buyouts, and I largely just expected them to just hover around mediocre play, be in the 80, 85 point range. Nothing crazy. Again, good enough to be considered as a possible playoff team, but not bad enough to where top 10 pick is a possibility for them. But Kirill Kaprizov has been absolutely dynamic this year, putting together a Hart Trophy caliber season so far, around 30 games into the season. Matt Boldy alongside him has also been absolutely remarkable this year. There's a reason why he was chosen to represent the U.S. at the Four Nations face-off in a couple weeks. And the defense is always solid. The big thing from last year to this year that I think is making a big difference is Phil Gustin and Marc-Andre Fleury are having great bounce back years. Last year, they both really struggled. So the fact that they've been good so far this year, too, has really helped bolster the team and has led to why the Wild are second in the Central and one of the top five teams in the NHL currently. So once again, similar to the Jets, Wild were a team that I expected to be more in the mediocre category, maybe make the wild card, but I didn't expect too much from them, to now a team that I think could potentially win a playoff run or maybe go further. And once again, the fact that they got off to such a good start means that even if they play mediocre 500 hockey, they're still likely going to hit around 95 to 100 points this year and still make the playoffs. So overall, the Wild have certainly overexceeded my expectations of calling them the Minnesota Wild. Another team that's been pretty disappointing this year is the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings are a team that's been pretty solid offensively. All things considered, Raven's been very good after signing an extension. DeBrinket's been solid. Larkin's been really good. Kane's been producing as his comfort. But the big thing for the Red Wings that's been holding them back is their defense. Their defense has been rough once again this year. You have Seider, who is carrying that decor. You have Simone Edvinsson, who this is his first full season likely in the NHL. He's been playing really solid so far. But when you have Chiara, Petrie, guys like that who are occupying four of the other six spots on your decor and who are all fringe NHLers at this point, it's hard for the Red Wings to really be much better than they are right now. And it's pretty disappointing because this was a team that a lot of people had penciled in as a wild card team this year. I had them just out, but I didn't expect them to be as bad as they've been to start this year. They're getting good goaltending from Cam Talbot and Alex Line. But again, the big thing is the defense. Their penalty kill, just further backing this point, is second worst in the NHL, only better than the New York Islanders. And one would have to wonder that if the Red Wings continue to struggle this year, and let's say next year potentially they get off to a bad start, they don't make any big moves in the offseason, one would have to start to wonder if the Yzer plan really is going to lead to the Red Wings having consistent and long-term playoff and championship success. And I hate to be the guy that says it, but I've kind of been a little shaky on the Yzer plan, especially of late, where he's continued to bring in these bottom pair level defensemen and ask them to fill top four roles, even though that's not what they're suited for anymore. But we'll see what happens at the end of the day. I'm not Steve Yzerman. I'm nowhere close to a general manager, being a general manager in the NHL, so I don't know any better. But personally, if the Red Wings don't start to turn things around soon, you'd have to imagine that the Red Wings ownership is going to look into potentially moving on from Steve Yzerman. Another team that's really overexceeded and overachieved from my initial expectations is the Winnipeg Jets this year. The Jets have been off to an amazing start. They cooled off a little bit of late, but when you win your first 15 games and then you start to lose a couple of games, you're going to fall back. It's inevitable. They weren't going to go 82-0, unfortunately, to many Winnipeg Jets fans. But anyways, this Jets team has still been clicking on all cylinders. The power play is at 30%, which is unbelievable. That's something you normally see from the Oilers, and the Jets have been great this year. Mark Scheifele looks like a number one center again. He's been really good on both sides of the ice, in the offensive zone and in the defensive zone, and could potentially get some Selke votes if he continues his great 200-foot game this year. Josh Morrissey, or as I like to call him, Josh Norrisey, is having another great year, offensively and defensively, really leading that blue line. And when you have complementary pieces in Kyle Connor and Nicola Ehlers, this Jets team has really been clicking this year and are going to do much better than my initial prediction for them, which was a wild card team. They're likely going to win the Central, and we'll see what happens at the end of the day, what they do in the playoffs. I think that's the big thing that we have to still wait on, because the Jets have had good seasons in the past, but the big hump for them has been, okay, can they get over this bar, which is the playoffs, and go on a deep playoff run, similar to what they did back in 2018, where they lost in the Western Conference Final to the Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll see what happens, and as you likely have noticed by now, I still haven't mentioned Connor Hellebuck, who is likely going to win the Vezina once again. So for a team, once again, that I had as a fringe wildcard team and a team that I could have seen taking a step back, they've taken 3 steps forward and have been outstanding this year. So I have to sing their praises, and I fully expect them to make the playoffs with how great of a start they had this year. Another team that I don't think has quite lived up to their expectations so far this year is Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche I had as the second best team in the Central Division. I had them as one of the top teams in the Western Conference, and obviously in the entire NHL by that transitive property. And the Avalanche were a team that just got completely ravaged by injuries to start the season. Even before the season, they knew that a lot of their players were going to be, some of their tie-in players were going to be missing some time to start the year. And thankfully, McKinnon, Ranton, and McCarr were able to hold it down. In the meantime, most of their top players have returned from injury, returned from whatever absences they had. Landeskog is still the big guy who the Avalanche are still waiting to see if he's able to suit up for them once again. But overall, it seems like the Avalanche survived the injury bug. The big thing for the Avalanche, and they've been very proactive in changing this, was the goaltending. Alexander Georgiev was brutal this year. Annunen was also brutal this year, and it was clear that to the Avalanche that if they wanted to go on a deep playoff run this year, make the playoffs just in general, they really need to do something with their goaltending. Both of those guys, I believe, were on expiring contracts. I know Georgiev for sure was, and the Avalanche decided to be proactive with it. And 30 games into the season, I think it's a good move. It's hard for goalies at the trade deadline to get used to their new team, especially then the playoffs are a month away. So it's kind of hard for these goaltenders to understand the system, to play well, know where the defense is going to be, etc. So to make the move now, as of a couple weeks ago, in fixing their goaltending, I think what is going to really bode well for the Colorado Avalanche. And picking up Mackenzie Blackwood, who was a solid goalie for San Jose the past year and a half, and a guy really who was cast off by the Devils, and the Sharks are by no means a solid defensive team. He's been a really solid goalie, so I think that he's going to step in and really take on this starting role for the Colorado Avalanche and provide really good goaltending, give them a lot of saves, and that's what the Avalanche need. The Avalanche can outscore anyone 5-3, 5-4. So as long as Blackwood's able to hold it down, this Avalanche team should be fine. So this is a team that at this point I think has certainly been underwhelming, but I wouldn't be shocked if they're finishing top 3 in the Central by the year's end, just because they were very proactive in their goaltending issue, and I commend them for that. So we'll see what happens, but I certainly expect the Avalanche to be better than how they started this year as they get more healthy and as the goaltending starts to take form. This next overachieving team that I have that I want to discuss is essentially the Flyers from last year. Calgary Flames were a team that I had written off for a bottom 5 pick this year. I thought they were going to be terrible. I was expecting them to do a massive fire sale, trading away guys like Kadri, trading away Rasmus Anderson, and just tearing things down to the studs and just full-blown rebuild. Dustin Wolf has certainly changed that. He's gotten off to quite a good start, and especially at home, he's been playing much better at home than away. And for the Flames, who have been playing like 50-50 split so far of home and away games, the fact that Dustin Wolf's been playing great at home has really helped the Flames stay in this playoff hunt. I still expect the Flames to fall out as the weeks and months go on, and by the trade deadline, I do expect them to still be sellers. But the point of the matter is they're still off to a much better start than I could have imagined. I thought they'd be with the Blackhawks and Sharks near the bottom of the league, but they're still punching and kicking near the wild card spot, which is much there. You could have expected maybe the first couple of weeks you're kind of hovering around that range when you're at the 10 to 12 points here, but now we're into mid, almost late December, and the Flames are still right around where the wildcard teams are, other wildcard teams are. So for the Flames to be doing that at this point is very impressive to me, and that's why I wanted to talk about them overachieving, even though I do expect them to still fall down to earth and wind up being sellers at the trade deadline. The one other disappointing team that I want to discuss today is the Nashville Predators. This is probably the most obvious one to most people. If they see an overachiever, underachiever, who's doing well, who's not doing well video, you'd have to imagine that whoever's making the video is going to talk about how the Nashville Predators have just been an absolute tire fire this year. And that's coming from a Blackhawks fan. So I'm enjoying the Nashville tire fire, but not even my wildest dreams could have imagined the Nashville Predators being as bad as they've been to start this season. We're 30 games in. It's seeming like this is what the Predators are, just a team that has no finish, a team that's really struggled offensively and defensively, which is quite surprising, and a team that's primarily held together by UC Saros, their goaltender. So the Nashville Predators, again, as people have rehashed time and time again, had a big offseason. They signed Steven Stamkos. They signed Jonathan Marchessault up front. They signed Brady Shea on the back end. And for a team that was expecting to potentially go on a Stanley Cup run, for sure make the playoffs, they found themselves currently at the bottom of the NHL, even behind the Chicago Blackhawks, which once again is absolutely wild as a Blackhawks fan. The one big thing that I'm at least trying to be positive about when I'm looking at the Nashville Predators is the fact that most of their players are having career or just in the past like 5-10 years very low shooting percentages that you'd have to imagine are going to get better at some point. Just like when a player is shooting 30%, you just have to imagine, okay, they're not going to consistently be shooting 30%. A lot of these Predators players, such as Marchessault and Stamkos, two of their big additions, have been rather snake bitten to start the year. So you'd have to imagine that at some point the luck is going to start to go the Nashville Predators' way, and they're going to be able to pick up more wins as things go along. I certainly don't think they're going to remain in the bottom five, but the big thing for the Predators is this hole that they've dug for themselves is so deep where they're going to need to be at a 115-point pace to even get to 95 points in the year. And 95 points should, in theory, be enough for a wildcard spot, but who knows at the end of the day, things always change. But the point is, the Nashville Predators, just for how bad they started the year, they have a lot of ground to make up, and they can't really avoid like a 5-game losing streak would essentially mean the Nashville Predators will not be making the playoffs this year. So the Predators were a team that I thought would be a top 3 team in the Central this year, but it's clear that that's certainly not going to happen, and they might just miss the playoffs altogether. So that'll do it for this edition of the Venture More Sports podcast, talking about which teams have been overachieving, which teams have been underachieving. Let me know if there's any teams that I missed. Who do you guys think have been overachieving to your expectations, underachieving to your expectations? Do you agree with the teams that I have picked out? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel as well. And yeah, let me know, again, all your thoughts. Would love to hear them, and I'll see you guys again soon. See ya.